When you first visit our website, you go to calc.formate621.com. This is the screen that you are going to see. You will have your login screen, and on the right-hand side, you're going to see the latest updates. So I would recommend for you to just see and check if there's a new update came out. So if there's a new update or enhancement coming up, it will be always posted under the latest program updates on your login screen. This information will be available for you once you log in as well. Once we take a look at the different menu options, I will show you where to find this information within the calculator. So when you're logging in, you're going to use, of course, your own company code and your own username and password. Right now, I'm just going to log into my own. All right, and once we are in, this is the screen that you're going to see. This is going to show your own clients. So your client list is going to be listed down in the main screen. On the left-hand side, you're going to have your detailed menu items, and on the top, you have the standard menu. Under the standard menu, first we have the settings. So we have client list, account list, currencies, change password, the security question, languages, and other settings. So most of this is self-explanatory, but let's just go through them anyway so you would get familiar with the different settings. So as you see, all the data on the calculator will be presented in a table grid. In order to filter a grid, you can simply hover over the first row and enter the filter that you want to narrow the list down by. You can also order the list by clicking on the header, and it will change the ordering of the tables depending on which columns you want to sort by. You can filter by multiple columns, so I could have Smith here and ETT on this side, and that will narrow this list down. So you can also select which columns you want to see under the settings, client list. As we are in the cloud version of the calculator, we are limited on the number of columns and the amount of information that you can enter. In the cloud version, you will not be able to enter any client-specific information as such as a client name, as the client's address. You will not be able to enter social security numbers. We do not want client-specific information to be on the cloud. So when you're creating forms, you will see that it will generate the forms for you that's completely filled in, except the client information on the top of the Form 8621. So we can narrow this list down by the type of shareholder, username, user number, and notes. So if you are sharing user accounts, I would recommend to enter your username under the notes, so you can quickly select your own clients and find your own clients. You don't have to figure out what names you may enter for different clients, because that can get confusing. So under the client ID, we recommend that you enter the first four digits of the last name of the taxpayer and the last four digits of the social security number, but you can enter any client ID that you may see fit for your use. So the next is the account list. It's similar to the client list. You can select if you want to see closed accounts, registered accounts, or you want to see the account type. If you unselect these columns will not show up on your screen. Under currencies, so our calculator supports more than 150 different currencies. Here you see all the currency codes, and these are the active currencies that you have currently in the calculator. So I have the Canadian account, I have euros, I have British pounds, I have US dollars. You are allowed to select up to 6 currencies at a time. So for example, if I would want to work in, let's say, Hungarian forints, if I would try to select it, the calculator will give me the warning that we already have 6 currency selectors, so I have to unselect one in order to be able to select the new ones. So let's say I unselect the INR and select the Hungarian forints. Now I can do that, and I can click on Save. So once we set up a new fund, the Hungarian forint now is going to be an option for us to set up. Anything that you already set up will stay in the system. This is just the active currencies in the dropdown once we are setting up funds. Next one is the change password. That's self-explanatory. You can just type in your new password and save. You have the security questions. The security questions are important if you want to reset your password. For example, when you forgot your password and you cannot log in, if you have this security question selected, you will be able to change the password without logging in. Or you can just contact your administrator. They can log in as an admin and reset your password through the administrative user interface. Next is our languages. The calculator supports currently English and French. I'm going to leave it on English for now. And the next settings we have is under other settings. So the program supports spreadsheet programs to export data grids. So any data grids that you see, you may be able to export. We have three options. We have the Excel workbook, the Excel worksheet, and OpenOffice. The Excel workbook and worksheet is designed to work with the CCH text software, the Pro System FX and the Global FX and the CCH Access, which means when you export into the Microsoft Excel workbook or worksheet, your data is going to start on line 7 because that is the default for importing under that program. However, if you select the OpenOffice, your export will start on line 1. Next is our diagnostics. So the diagnostics will give you a heads up when you're typing your transactions in, and I will show you once we start getting into the transactions. It will highlight any rows that are over or under the threshold amount that you set. The average transaction, the transaction per share is higher than the threshold. So I usually just set it around 100. I tried lower numbers, but I find that especially in funds that fluctuates in value a lot, you will have everything selected. So just pick a number that you're comfortable with so you can catch the typos, but it won't highlight every single row for you. Next one is our quick print. Once we get to our completed forms, we'll show you that we have 3 different tabs. We have our calculations tab, the forms guide tab, and the text summary tab. And you're going to have a print option. So here you can set which tabs you want to print in one shot, or you can select each tab separately to print them separately. Next one is the consolidated forms guide. I recommend that to be used if you are not using the CCH product and you would like to transfer the information from our calculator into your text software with the least amount of keystrokes that you have to key in. With the consolidated forms guide, you will be able to transfer all of your completed 8621s in one shot instead of transferring them one by one. So I'm going to leave that on, and I will show you how that works down the road. So we can just save and close. Next option is our help. Here you will find the user guide. This is not a how-to guide. This is just an explanation guide, what is on your screen and what functions are available in the calculator. Next is our change log. As I said, these are all the updates and new features that we implemented in the calculator, so you will be able to see a history of that here. This is more detailed than the first page one on the main page before you log in. The main page only shows the last 2 updates. This one shows the last 10, so you can see a little bit more. And the next is our Excel import template. Right now, to import into the calculator, you have to use a template. We are working on a more flexible solution, but it's not available for now. So you will have to transfer your Excel spreadsheet into the template before you can import it into the calculator. Next option is our references. We have our forms and instructions. So that will show you the forms that we have in the system back to 2004. And of course, the form instructions. So this is just a quick way to access them, so you don't have to go to the IRS website. Next is our codes and regulations. These are all the relevant codes between 1291 and 1298 that is relevant to the Form 8621s and PFICs. So you will find them all in here. So if you need to refer back to some of the codes of regulations, they are all here under your fingertips. And the next menu option is the log out. Let's start by setting up a new client. So under the new client information, you will see that you can set up clients who are individuals, corporations, partnership, escorts, trust, estates. So let's just stick with the individuals. You can select to leave it on a calendar year basis, so your tax year end will be December 31st, or you can actually select any other fiscal year end if you are working, for example, with a corporation. Under the taxpayer or spouse, you can link two accounts together and create joint 8621s. And here we have our client ID. So this is going to be the ID that identify our clients. So I'm just going to say, let's say we are working with John Doe. So that's going to be Doe and 0123, just to give an example. Next is our US years. So since the PFIC rules treat the transaction history, depending on if it falls into a US year or a non-US year, you're going to have to create your US reporting periods. So if your client is a US citizen by birth, you would enter the date of birth. If the client just became subject to US taxation, let's say, oh, there's a new participant. If the client became subject to taxation, let's say in 2014, January 1st, you would enter 2014, January 1st here. When we are going to create 8621s, you may have funds running back to, let's say, 2001, but the client only became subject to taxation in 2014. Here you would enter the 2014 year. If the client is a US person from birth, you would enter the date of birth. So this is not the first year you are filing for 8621s. This is the first date when the client became subject to US taxation. So let's say John is subject to US taxation since birth, since he's a US citizen, and he was born in 1978, October 5th. The ending date you would leave blank. You would only enter the ending date if the client ceased to be subject to US taxation, for example, because they expatriated. Next option is our OVDP period. So if you like to create 8621s for an OVDP client, you would enter the OVDP period beginning and end year here, and the calculator will automatically select to use the alternate resolution under OVDP when you're creating 8621s. You don't have to make any other elections. So under notes, you can make notes for yourself. And of course, as I said, if you are sharing user accounts, you may want to put your username under your notes so you can easily find your clients. So once we save this, the client shows up under our client list. To select a client, simply click on anywhere on the row, and it will take you to the client account. So on the left-hand side, now we have our client-specific information. We have the client accounts, we have their investments, the forms that you can create, and of course, you can edit this client. So under this client, you can first select a new account. So in order to create a PFIC, we have to create an account first. So under the account, you're going to see all the financial institutions that are entered into the system. Right now, I only have one, but if you have multiple already entered, it will all show up here. Or if it's an institution that is not in the system, you can just click on New Institution and enter the information here. So I'm just going to select the information that I already have. Then you can enter your account number. You can select the account type. I'm just going to say this is an investment account. And then we have an ownership. So sometimes you run into a situation when you have a non-resident owner and the client only owes 50% of the shares. When you are keying information into the system, you would always enter the full 100%. You don't have to calculate proration. The calculator will do that for you. All you're going to have to do is to add a new owner, select a non-US owner. Let's say that's 50 and 50. And this way, the calculator will prorate all of your entries when calculating the Form 8621s to 50%. If you want to remove an owner, you can simply just click on Remove, and it will remove the latest owner. So for this time, we're just going to select 100% for simplicity's sake, and click on Save. So then we have our account set up. Next is setting up our PFIC. So you can set up PFICs under two different screens. You can go into accounts, select the account and add the PFIC there, or you can go to investments and add the PFIC there. So usually you're gonna go into select the account, create a new account, then select the PFIC there. So we can add the PFIC here. So let's just say fund 01. The fund code is optional, but sometimes these funds have really similar names. So a fund code is the easiest way to identify and separate them. So I would recommend to use the fund code field when you have it available for you. The classification is an optional field since it's only an information. It is only part of the information section of the 8621. It is not part of the calculations. So I would recommend to fill it in, but it is not affecting the actual calculation itself. And here we have our currencies. So we can only select the currencies that are currently active under our settings. So let's just set up a Canadian account. And under your notes, you can make notes for yourself. These notes are not going to the IRS. This is just for you within the calculator. Once we have our fund or PFICs already entered, you can simply select it. You can also go to the investments and select it from there. And then we are going to get into the transaction screens. So in order to create 8621s, you need the full transaction history for the account, for the PFIC that you are working on. You're going to have the first purchase till the last sale. So let's say, for example, this client became subject to taxation in 2014. We have a fund going from 2010. I would have to enter the transaction history from 2010. I cannot just use the information after 2014. Because when we are filing under 1291, we have to allocate excess distributions to the holding period, and the holding period starts on 2010, not 14. So under the data entry options, we have 4 different transaction types. We have purchases, we have reinvestments, we have distributions, and sales. The purchase is self-explanatory when the client buys the investment. The next option is the reinvestment. The reinvestment is 2 transactions merged into one. This is when the investment distributes, but the client doesn't get the distribution out, but using it as a reinvestment, so buys additional shares. So this is basically a distribution and a purchase in one. It will help you create a much shorter transaction summary and cut down on your data entry time. Next one is the distribution, when the client actually receives the distribution and takes it out of the account. The next is the sale, when the client actually sells the PFIC. So let's take a look at the other options that we have. We have our date. So let's say the first purchase was 2010, October 5th. The date format is year, month, and date. The number of units, let's say they purchased 10,000 units. And then we have for how much they purchased for. You have 2 options. You can enter the per share amount, or you can enter the total amount. So if they purchase the 10,000 units for 10,000 Canadian dollars, you would enter 10,000 Canadian. The exchange rate automatically populates using the date of the transaction and automatically converts it to US currency. We are using the XE rates, which is one of the IRS approved rates, or actually suggested on their website. So that's what we are using. But if you would like to use a different rate, you can always override this. You can enter your own rate if you want to. If you would like to enter the transaction using the per share amount, let's say they paid $1 per share, you would enter the 1 and select the per share amount. And when you save this information, it will calculate the total amount for you. It will also show you the per share amount, and it will give you the transaction history. So to build a transaction history, let's just enter a couple of transactions. So let's enter at 2010, October 25th. We have a distribution of, let's say, $10. Under distributions, we have different options. We have a dividend, interest, capital gains, return of capital, or cost-based adjustments. So we know that return of capital will reduce the cost base, but you have sometimes you run into transactions that does not really result a distribution, but results in a cost-based adjustment. So this is where you would record that as a distribution and a cost-based adjustment, so the calculator will adjust the cost base up. So return of capital will adjust the cost base down, cost-based adjustments will adjust the cost base up. So let's just say this was a dividend distribution. And let's enter reinvestment. So let's say in 2010, November 25th, they reinvested the $10 that they received, 10, and save. And let's enter a sale as well. In 2010, December 31st, they decide to sell 10,000 units for 10,000 Canadian dollars, and it's not per share. As you see, the transactions are color-coded. We have sales in red, reinvestments in blue, distributions in green, and purchases in black. So the distribution should be $10. Save. Whenever you edit a line, the calculator will default to that line. It will center that on your screen and highlights it in green. So it's easy to find the last transaction that you edited. On the left-hand side, it will show you your currencies. It will show the ownership, the total units that you have entered, and the diagnostics is the average of the total transactions that you enter. So right now we have $1 per share for 10,000. We have $1 per share for 10,000. Then we have $10 per share for that 100 or for the 10 unit that we entered there. And when I said the diagnostics, I set it for $100. So if I enter a transaction, let's say 2011, December 12th, purchase of 100 units for $100,000, that will give me a highlighted screen that something's went wrong. We are over our $100 threshold. The diagnostics shows that our average is now $253, and we have a transactions that is $1,000 per share. So it's clearly a typo that we can quickly create, enter by, or correct by saving 100 units for $100. Editing and saving the transactions to get back to the regular transaction history. So to export transactions, you can click on the export transaction icon here. Or to import transactions, you would click on the open transaction screen. So under the open transactions, you would choose your file, select the template, the Excel template that you worked on, and import it there. And when you submit, that will import the transaction history. So let's do an export and import for you. So if I export the transactions from here, that creates an F861 file. It is not a readable document. It is an encrypted document. So let's just create a new fund. Let's say fund 2. And when I click on the open transactions icon and choose file, I can just simply select the transaction history that I exported, click on open and submit, and it will recreate our transaction history based on the information that was in the export. Let's take a look at our transaction history. This is our transaction history import template for Excel. So it's similar to your data entry screen. So we have our date, we have our transactions. Again, it's a drop down. Then we have the number of units, we have amounts, and then we have a reported option. And let's talk about this reported option. This reported option comes into effect when we have a transaction or a reinvestment. Reinvested transactions only have a cost base when they were reported on a US tax return. So if this client is filing taxes for 2014, 15, and 16, and never filed a return before. They're just doing this silent disclosure, and you have a transaction history that goes back till 2010. For 2010, 11, 12, and 13, if there's any reinvested earnings, you're going to have to select the no for the reported transactions because it was not reported on a US tax return. So let's take a look at that on this transaction entry. So let's enter a non-reported transaction. So let's say we have 2012, 0101. We have a reinvested distribution of 10 units for $150. But since we never filed a tax return for 2012, you would unselect the reported checkmark and save it that way. So you will still have the transaction amount, but under the cost base, this block of shares will not have a cost base. It will have a cost base of 0. If you ever run into a scenario when you have a question or you don't really understand what this section means, you can always refer back to the user guide, or more often you will see a little red eye icon. If you click on that, that will give you more information and how to fill in that screen. Yes, you just have to use the right format. So right now, we have this template that you're going to have to use. We are working on a new option where you would just simply import your original spreadsheet that you have, then make the selections, which column is transfers to the date, which is the transactions, which is our units, select the transaction types, and import it that way. But for now, you're going to have to use the transaction history import template. When you're copying and pasting, make sure you are pasting the values only, because if you transfer and just copy and paste and you paste over formulas, the calculator will not be able to import. So when you copy and paste, always use the values only. Okay, don't save. So if you want to add a note to your transaction, let's say we are entering a new transaction for 2012 0202, and I want to add a note. You can click on the note icon on the screen, and let's just say this is estimated amount. By default, the include on PDF statement will not be selected. If you want your note to be included in the statement that you send to the IRS, you can simply mark the checkbox, and that will print with your statements. If you do not want it, you just want it for your own, you can leave that blank and then click on Save. The note will show up here. If you hover over it, you will see the note amount. Or if you want to edit, you can click on the Edit icon, and of course, you can edit your note over there too. If you would like to delete a transactions, you can just click on the garbage can, and that will delete that one transactions only. If you want to delete all of your transactions that are not locked, you can click on the delete button on the top of the transaction history, and that will delete all of your transactions that are not locked. So if I click on here, it will confirm that yes, it wants to delete, and that will clear out my transaction history. It will not delete anything that is used in a calculation, so it will only delete the transactions that are not used in a calculation. So once we start calculating, I will show you how the transactions get locked as we create 8621s. What you need from your clients when you're working on 8621 is a full transaction history. Usually the brokers will be able to give this to you on an Excel sheet or just a printout. Otherwise, you're going to have to dig this information out from your quarterly or monthly statements. And it's a lot easier to work from a transaction summary than from the monthly statements. So I would recommend for anybody who has the option to ask for it, and hopefully you're going to get it, and then it's going to be just a quick data entry exercise. You don't have to dig through mounts and mounts of paperwork. So let's just go to another client where I already entered some transactions, and let's take a look at Smith 5541. So we have a fund already set up here. This is a monthly distribution fund. It was purchased in 2014, October 5th, and it is distributing on a monthly basis $10. So I just use round numbers, so it's easy to follow. So we have $10,000 units, and we have a $10 distributions each and every month. And let's say this client is coming in 2015 and filing for 2015. We are creating an 8621 for 2015. So to create 8621, you're going to go to Form 8621s. And I actually already have one here. So let's just delete this and let's start from scratch. So when you created your transaction history, you will have the option to create a new Form 8621. So if you click on the new Form 8621 button, you will have the option to make your year-end entries. And this is where you would make all your elections as well. So I'm just going to say we're going to create a form for 2015. Your shareholder tax year should automatically populate. And you can select if this is a CFC. And then we can make our election. So for this case, let's just not make an election. If you don't make an election, the calculator will default to calculate under Section 1291 and use the punitive taxation of the excess distributions. If you are running into a calculation when the client already filed prior 8621s and already made an election in a prior year, let's say they made a mark-to-market election in 2012 and now you're in 2015, you don't have to recreate all those transactions or all those forms in the system. You will still have to enter the transaction history of the carryovers from the prior year. But all you're going to have to create or select is the mark-to-market override. You are not making an election. If this is a new 8621s and no elections has been made, you would select the mark-to-market election to make the mark-to-market election, or you would select the make the QEF election if you want to make a QEF election. So for the first one that we create, let's just not make any elections. So we're going to default to the 1291. We're going to have to enter the fair market value at the end of the year. So yes, under 1291, the fair market value is not part of the calculation, but it is part of the first page of the Form 8621s. So just get used to it, looking up the fair market value or get it from your clients and enter it. So the calculator will select the right box under the fair market value at the end of the year on the Form 8621s. So let's say this was just $10,000 US dollars. You can also select the per share amount if you get the information on a per share basis. The foreign tax credit is the foreign tax credit that is applicable to this fund only. There is an option to transfer foreign tax credits out of your 1116 onto your Form 8621 itself to reduce the additional tax and interest amounts. If you leave the foreign tax credit on the 1116, you will not be able to reduce the additional interest that the calculator calculates. And most of the times you're going to see, especially for mutual funds or investments that are running on a really long holding periods, back to, let's say, the 90s or the 2000s, the interest amount is higher than the actual tax amount. So in order to reduce that interest amount, you're going to have to transfer some of the foreign tax credit onto the 8621. However, you have to be careful how much amount you transfer, because if you don't use foreign tax credits on the 8621, you cannot carry it forward. So once you transfer it off the 1116 onto the 8621, any unused amounts will be wasted. You will not be able to carry it forward. Also, for example, in Canada, we have tax-free savings accounts that we don't pay tax on, but many times we have mutual funds investments in it, which are PFICs. So there are no tax paid in Canada on these PFICs. So there is no foreign tax credit to be transferred onto this fund. Even though the client may have paid taxes in Canada, we cannot allow the foreign tax credit to be transferred for this one particular investment that the client didn't pay taxes in Canada on to the 8621. So just be careful what you transfer into what you enter into the foreign tax credit screen. It is beneficial if you have additional tax and interest. So what I usually do is calculate without the foreign tax credit, see if there's additional tax and interest, and if there is, then I'm looking into if there is an option to transfer this foreign tax credit over or not. That way you're not wasting time calculating your foreign tax credit for this investment only when it's not even making a difference on the tax return, and you're not wasting foreign tax credits by transferring them off the 1116 onto the 8621 when you are not using it. The next is our interest stop date. The interest stop date is the interest stop date is the due date of the tax return. So the 2015 return is due in 2016 April. I think it was April 18, so that would be 2016 April 18. And the reference ID would be just an alphanumeric characters that is just part of the information section of the tax return or the Form 8621. You can make up your own, or you can use the system-generated reference numbers. So I'm just going to leave the reference number for the system-generated one, and then click on Save. So if we calculate this form, we can just simply click on the Calculate button. We have three options. We have the Edit button that will bring us back to our data entry screen, where we have our year. Oh, and I didn't talk about the annualized distribution. We'll talk about that in a second. That will bring you back to the Edit screen. Then we have the Calculate button for calculating. And then we have the Delete button if you want to delete these year-end entries. By clicking on the Delete button here, that will only delete the 8621 itself. It will not delete your transaction history. It will not delete your client. It will not delete your account. It only deletes this one line of entries. So I'm just going to cancel this out. And let's calculate. So when you calculate, it will give you your calculation statement. This is a statement that you must attach to your tax return. You will not attach the preview. We will show you how to create the PDF version that you will attach to your tax return. So this is just our preview. That's showing our current year holdings. It's showing our excess distribution calculations for the distributions that we received. We received 12 distributions. It was a monthly distribution. So for each distribution, we calculate our excess distribution amounts, then allocate it to the distribution itself, then calculate the additional tax and interest. And then we adjust our 15B amount for next year going forward for the prior year distributions. Under the Forms Guide, you will see a preview how this 8621 will affect your tax return. So you will see your 1040. So from this 8621, we had a $120 US distributed on a monthly basis. Only $38 will end up as a dividends. Most of them were excess distributions. And on the excess distributions, we are going to calculate the additional tax and interest and allocate it to current year. So $52 was allocated to the current year. And there's an additional $12 tax and no interest for the excess distributions that were applicable to this fund. Then you get a screenshot of your Schedule B. So we have the $38 that goes on Schedule B first before it hits the 1040. And then we have our 8621. So as I said, in the cloud version of the calculator, the header of the 8621 is blank. So there's going to be no shareholder information. But we are going to have our banking information and our reference number. Then we have our classification, if there was any purchases, the number of shares, and this is the fair market value that I was talking about. If you don't enter the fair market value, the calculator will always default to A, 50 to 0, and that may not be accurate for your client. So always enter the fair market value. We are filing under Section 1291, and we have $83 worth of excess distributions. And we are not making any elections. So as you know, the 1291 will work on a Part 5. So according to the instructions, you are supposed to create a separate Part 5 for each excess distribution or distribution calculations. So you know that in our case, we had 12 distributions, which would mean you would have to create 12 separate Part 5. So that would look like each Part 5 would have $10 here and calculating the excess distribution going down. What we opted to choose is to create a summary form, and attach the statements separately with the details. That way you can cut down on paperwork and slim down your tax returns. So what we have is reporting our totals. We are not reporting line 15B to 15D, that will be in the details. We are only reporting the total excess distribution, and the totals of the additional tax, interest, and the excess are allocated to the current year. And we give them a note that you're going to have to take a look at our calculation details for the details between the excess distributions and how they were actually calculated. We had no problems with the IRS with this approach, and they have no problem as long as you attach your calculation statements, you should be fine. Next is our tax software entry screen, and this is only for the CCH product. So if you are not using the CCH product, you're not going to use the data entry screen at all from here. You would use your forms guide to transfer the income onto your tax return. And of course, you can do it on a form-by-form basis, or you can use the consolidated guide. And I show you how to use this consolidated guide to cut down on the number of entries that you're going to have to do. So you don't have to transfer your dividends, line 21, and the additional tax on a form-by-form basis. You can do it in one shot. So when I was talking about the quick print options, this is our quick print button, the print button with the lightning bolt. So if you click on that, that will print all of the tabs that you selected in your quick print options. So it will it will show your calculations, the forms guide, and the form itself. So let's just cancel this out. If you click on the print button, that will only print the current tab. So if I just want to print the forms guide, I would go to the forms guide and click on the print button itself. Then it will only print the forms guide itself. So in order to lock in the information and create a carryover for the next year, you click on the Save Form. And that locks in your form and creates a placeholder for next year. So if I go and close this down, we now have a 2016 placeholder. And here we have the edit, calculate, and delete options again. Then we have the 2015 year that is locked. We can no longer edit it. If you need to edit the 2015 year, first you're going to have to delete the 2016, unlock the 2015, and then we are back to the editing mode. We can make changes and edit. And we have this limitation because many information from one year affects the next year carrying forward. So in order to make sure that your current information is up to date, you always have to unlock and delete your carry forward information before you can edit forms. So let's just calculate again and save and carry forward. And let's just make the data entry for this form and enter 10,000, no foreign tax credit, and save. Then we can just simply calculate our next year. And there's no distributions because I didn't enter information for 2016, but that's how you would create multiple years of 8621s. So I was talking about statements that you have to attach your tax return that you will find under the PDF icon. So if you click on the PDF icon, you get a couple options. We have the full form and statements. We have the calculation statements only, and we have a distribution carryover amounts. This is just for your information if you want to put in your client's file. The full form and statements will create the 8621. This is a PDF format that you can just slip into your tax return or attach to your e-file tax return. Of course, you will have to fill in the header for the tax return for the taxpayer information. And this includes our calculation statements in a PDF format that you would have to attach to your tax return. So this is the statement that would go with your tax return, not the previews. If you just need the calculation statement because you are using your tax software to generate the form itself, you would just click on the calculation statement. It will create the same statement, but without the 8621s. So if we go back to our transaction history, now you can see that all these transactions that I used in the 2015 calculation are locked. So I cannot make any changes. In order to make an edit in our transactions for 2015, I would have to delete the 2016, unlock the 15, and then all these will be available for us. So if I go back, delete, unlock, and to go back to your transaction history, you can simply click on the name of the fund. That will take you back to the transaction history. Now I have the option to edit and change transactions. For example, if you realize that you missed a transaction or you made a typo, for example, you entered the wrong date. If you would like to make any elections, you would make it on this screen. So let's make a mark-to-market election. So again, we still have the annualized distribution. We have our fair market value of 10,000. So let's just increase it to 15,000 just to make it a little bit more interesting, and click Save. When you make an election, that will show up on the line. We are saying we are making the mark-to-market election in this year. If I would have made the override, this would have been a red icon. So any override you will see in red, elections you will see in black, just to differentiate between the two. So if I click on this, the calculator will make the election of the mark-to-market election. It will still see, does the excess distribution calculations, distributions, reinvestments, and at the end of the year, it will do our deemed disposition, adjust the cost base, and starts the excess distribution pool for next year. So under our forms guide, now we have the same excess distribution amount from the distributions, since the mark-to-market election doesn't happen until the end of the year. But we also have additional income from our mark-to-market election, since we are including the difference between our fair market value and the cost base at the beginning of the year. And we are now filling in Part 4 and Part 5 of the Form 8621. So that is how you make a mark-to-market election. If you want to make a QEF election, you click on QEF. That will open up a brand new screen for you. That will open up our PFIC annual information statement option. So without a PFIC annual information statement, you cannot make a QEF election, or you cannot calculate a QEF. So you're going to have this in hand before you start the QEF. Of course, the QEF can run on a fiscal year or on a calendar year. What we find that most of the time, the QEF going to run on a fiscal year, your taxpayer is running on a calendar year, and it will create a lot of back and forth adjustments and headaches. So even though the QEF is the most tax beneficial for the client tax-wise, tax fee and preparation fee-wise, it may not be the best option. So we always discuss that with your clients, because if you have a QEF that runs on a fiscal year, and you have a client that runs on a calendar year, you're going to run into adjustments. And I will take a look at quickly for that one. And let's just switch over to another fund for that. So this is the fund that is a little bit more complicated. So it started in 2008. It has some reinvested earnings, some sales, some distributions, and the taxpayer is filing on a calendar year basis. And let's just make a QEF election for 2015, and let's say the fair market value is 15,000 Canadian dollars. The interest update is 16/04/18, and we have our PFIC annual information statement running from 2000, and I'm making 2015. So let's say it's running from 2014 June 1st till May 31st. We are not going to make the deemed sale election, but if you need to make a deemed sale election, this is where you would. You just click on the deemed sale election, enter the fair market value on your qualification date, which is the beginning of the QEF tax year. But for this example, I'm not going to make the election. Then you copy the information over from your annual information statement. So let's say we have ordinary earnings of $150, cap gains of 0.05 per share per day. Notice that the per day amount is not eligible, not selectable until you enter the per share amount. And let's say we have a 0.05 per share amount. Sometimes your annual information statement will include information where the distributions have a date. You can enter them right here by clicking adding a row, and enter the distribution information there. To delete a row, you just select the checky box at the beginning and click on delete row. I'm not going to enter a reference ID for this one. Click on save. So as you see, we are making the QEF election. If you click on calculate, the calculator will give you a warning that we are making a QEF election where the election takes place in 2014 because our PFIC runs from 2014 June 1st till May 31st of 2015. So in order to calculate our 2015 form, first we're going to have to do an adjustment on your 2014 form. So we're going to have to close this. The calculator creates for you an adjustment line. It will show you that this is an adjustment that is not calculated yet. It's highlighted in yellow. It will give you the note why we are making an adjustment, and that will be part of your calculation statement. So first we're going to have to calculate this. You can just click on calculate and save, or you would actually, since we have never filed this return, it's not an adjustment on a pre-existing return, you would have to enter the fair market value at the end of the year. And your foreign tax credits, save, and calculate this form. So we are making a QEF election on the 2015 return that takes effect in 2014. So we're going to have to remove income under 1291 starting June 1st, and that's what we are doing here. So we are removing any distributions that we received after June 1st of 2014, refile this return, and save. So that will create your PDF statements. You're going to have to go back to 2014, make the adjustment, and move on to 2015. Then we can finally calculate our 2015, and it will create your calculation statements. From here on, it's going to be similar to what we already done. We have our calculation statements, but as you see, we also have a sale after our PFIC tax year, which means we're going to have to do another adjustment once our PFIC information statement is available for us in 2016. So QEF can get kind of convoluted with all these adjustments going back and forth, but the calculator will warn you every single time there is an adjustment required. So once you create this 8621 under QEF, we have our forms guide, we have everything selected, our capital gains and losses, then we have our 8621. You can save this form, carry it to the next year. There we go. And let's just enter the 2016 information. Let's say just 15,000, no foreign tax credit, 150, 100, and 100, just to make it simple. And save. So when I click on this, even though it calculates, it's telling me that we had a sale between the fiscal year end of the PFIC and the calendar year end of the taxpayer. So we're going to have to go back to the 2015 return and file the adjustment to adjust for the capital gains, because now we have the capital gains or the cost-based adjustment for to the end of the year for 2015 till December 31st of 2015. So if you click this save, we can file the 2016 return, but we're going to have to go back to 15 to create to work on the adjustment at the same time. So as you see, the QEF can be quite labor-intensive with all the adjustments that you're going to have to do depending on the client's situation. So it may be the best option for tax-wise, but it may not be the best option for tax preparation, fees, and time-wise for the client. Sometimes you receive the annual information statement specific to the client that will show your total amounts for the clients. You must attach that with the tax return. If you just receive a general one showing your per share per day amount, you don't have to attach that to the tax return. So let's take a look at our forms guide, because I said we're going to do a consolidated forms guide. So I'm just going to create an 8621 for 2015, just quickly, 0, 1, 10,000, 2016, 04, 18, just to have more than one. Save, create, save, and come on. There we go. Close. So now we have two 2015 tax returns. So in order to transfer all the information from both of the 8621s that we have for 2015, we just click on that paper icon here. That will give us our consolidated forms portfolio. And we can select the 2015 information, and that will give you everything. All of your forms that you completed, locked, and carried forward. So it will only include your information for 2015 for the locked forms. Anything that you haven't locked, you will not be able to see here. But anything that's locked, you will be able to see here. So this is where you would work from to transfer your information to your tax return, which means you would enter $63 on your Schedule B that will transfer to your ordinary dividends amount on 1040. You would enter the capital gains and losses and enter $300 on your other income screen. So it shows the Schedule B entries. It will show your Schedule D entries. It will show your 8949 entries. And it will also give you a PDF statements. Again, the additional tax software entries for the CCH products. It's not for anything else. Currently, we are not supporting any other tax software, but we are working with other tax software, so that will come down the road. If you click on the PDF statement, that will give you the details for your 1116 adjustments, your line 21 adjustments, and for any additional taxes and interest that you're going to have to enter. That will show up here as an additional statement that you can just attach to your tax return, so you don't have to create all this detailed entries. You just enter the one total amount from the forms guide. So the only thing I haven't talked about yet was that annualized distribution. Starting October 5th, distributions on a monthly basis. If we would have received this, we would have bought this fund on January 1st, we would have received 12 distributions of $10. So we would have had an annual distribution amount of 0.012, I believe. So when we are creating our 8621, let's just delete this, create a new one. So it was 2015. We don't have an annualized distribution. We calculations, let's say 15,000, 2016 0418, and save. When we are calculating, the calculator will only use the prior 3 years of the $30, what we actually entered. But we know that, and we end up with $82 worth of excess distributions and additional taxes, so the client gets additional income and additional taxes of $12 because we're only using the actual amount that we entered into the transaction history of the $30 that they actually received. But the IRS allows you to enter the amount that they would have received if they had this fund for the full year. So if I enter the 0.012 here and calculate, now the calculator picks up that they would have received $120 for 2014, and we end up with no excess distributions. So the taxpayer is actually just going to report the $120 as dividends instead of reporting the $38 as dividends plus 50 some dollars as other income plus the additional tax, and most of the times there's going to be additional interest as well. This annual distribution amount is available most of the times from your broker, or you can find it online. But if you cannot locate that information, you're just going to have to enter 0, and the calculator will default back to using the actual amount. So I guess this is the quick overview. So we've seen how the calculator functions. You're going to start with setting up your clients, then your accounts, then your investments, enter the full transaction history of the account. If you're making an OVDP, when you're entering your client, enter the OVDP period there. Make your US qualification periods under the edit client or the new client option. Make sure you use their date of birth, if they became subject to taxation because they are US citizens, if they just became subject to taxation because they moved to the US, or they became subject to taxation because they got a new green card, you would enter the date when they became a US person. And once you entered all of your transaction history or imported your transaction history, you can go into your Form 8621s, enter your year-end entries, make sure that you, once you're happy with the form, to lock it, create the Form 8621s in a PDF format that you can attach to your tax return. Then you transfer your income over to your tax return, and you can move on to the next client or to the next year.